Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. The good news is my internet's up and running with the new provider. That poor guy had a lot of work to do when he got here. Obviously they test the line quality, and his testing equipment was basically showing that mine was naff. And he spent an awful lot of time messing around with a phone socket that was basically an extension put in years ago that's never been used, and he just kept assuming that that was the main socket when in fact it wasn't. When he eventually found the main socket, which was, well, where it had been put in by the computer, things got a bit better, but the poor guy had to climb right up the telegraph pole, and he had to check with his office because there's certain telegraph poles of a certain age that are not safe to climb, and they have to have a frame or something. So the poor guy was up the top of the pole, connected up my line in the pouring rain. Then he had to go round to the actually the intercoms box, the exchange box, and actually connect me up to the fibre connection and everything. He was here about 3 hours all in all, whereas if he'd found the proper socket first go, then you know, wouldn't have taken him so long. But it's up and running, that's the main thing. And a little bit of magic with Windows 10, because the router is hardwired to the computer and is not running wirelessly. When I turned the computer on, it self-configured and came up and was working, and I had to do absolutely nothing compared with the poor guy who did all the work anyway. Anyway, it's up and running, that's the important thing. So that's that out of the way. Now it's very early in the day at the moment, and I've just been watching some other people's videos, Rick's in particular, and it just dawned on me such a difference. And the difference is between outside and inside. Now I've just got my DSLR out because this video camera doesn't show its settings, and it will film in incredibly low light like what it is now because it's early in the day. We may get some sun today, we may not. But although this seems like a greenhouse, and to most extents I suppose it is, because of the fact that it's attached to the house, it doesn't get its bright light till sort of mid to late morning, you know, at the point the sun comes round over the roof. Even if it's behind the clouds, it still brightens up at that point, unless it's pouring with rain like it was a bit yesterday. But I've just done a test with the DSLR. I basically put the DSLR against the glass, pointing back at the plants. And obviously that shows its readings. It shows the speed and the aperture that it thinks is correct, because it's set on auto at the moment, but it sets itself up in a position where it thinks it's suitable to take a picture. Yeah? And I had a look at those settings, and then I went outside and pointed the camera at the side of the greenhouse. The difference is staggering. And I mean staggering. Basically the camera was telling me that in here there was insufficient light to take a decent picture. It had to slow the speed down, the shutter speed down so much that it would have been impossible to hand hold that camera. Yeah? As soon as I went outside, more than enough light to take a picture handheld, and I mean a substantial difference. Yeah? It was either the difference of between being down at a 30th of a second and going up to 125th of a second. That's a lot of difference. And on the aperture side, it was the difference between the lens being wide open, which in that particular lens is 1.2, and going outside and being on f5.6. It's a dramatic difference. And it suddenly dawned on me that anyone who's not growing outside has limited light. Yeah, even if you're in a windowsill, it's not the same as being outside. So when is not enough light, and when is it too much? Well, in my book, if you take away direct sun on the leaves, there is no such thing as too much light. But how much light is that outdoors compared with indoors? Even in what appears to be a sunny window, the difference is quite incredible. And then I'll be specific, just have a look at Rick's Phalaenopsis. Now they're not classed as a highlight lover, are they? You know, well, they're classed as a shade lover, which is, that's a misdemeanor. I mean, anybody who reads that in old books, that's just wrong information, quite honestly. They do much better if they get more light. Now, they're not too keen on sun on the leaves, that's a different ball game. But if we exclude direct sun, the amount of light that you get outdoors is substantially higher than you will get anywhere in your house, and potentially, in my case, in the greenhouse, because of the shade netting, substantially higher outside than what it is inside. So while I'm thinking everything in here is getting more than enough light, I've taken a layer of shade netting off, only one at the moment, they're not getting enough light, really. The days are getting shorter as well, you know, so the amount of hours they get that light for is, you know, going down at quite a dramatic rate. So, as I've said, as a consequence this year, I'm going to try and make these plants think that they're outside through the winter. They won't get the outside temperatures they'd get in the UK. That will be maintained inside. But the shade netting can come off the roof soon because the sun's dropping its angle down. Yeah. Now that's a polycarbonate roof, which is opaque, so it's not clear, and it's also a bit grubby up there as well. It's difficult to get up there and clean it, so I just leave it like that. And then there's a layer of bubble wrap which has an amount of light reducing effect. It's not a lot, it's not like shade netting, but if you look up there at the moment, look at the difference between where there is no shade netting and where there is some. It's pretty dramatic. And you know, light from above actually does plants the world of good. It's natural, as opposed to like light coming in from the side in a window. You know, it's all one directional light. Plants will try and turn towards that light. And it is said, I've got no proof, that if you keep turning your plant to balance it, it doesn't do it a lot of good. Because the leaves keep trying to twist so that they get maximum photosynthesis by facing the light. And then you turn the plant round and they've got their back to the light, so they try and turn again. You know, it does sound a bit wrong. That wouldn't happen in a natural environment. It's very rare they would get one directional light. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, in a house, take away the thought of direct sun on the leaves, and I don't think you can give your plants too much light. I don't think it's possible. They need as much as you can possibly give them. And if you look at Rick's Phalaenopsis, a lot of which were rescue plants not that long ago, he hasn't been growing that long. So think about what those plants look like and just ask yourself, what is the difference between those plants and my plants? And I'll say that specifically, my plants, my Phalaenopsis in here. I know I haven't got that many. Well, actually, I've got more than most people think. But the difference in the light level that his plants are getting compared with what mine will ever get in the UK is dramatic. And are those plants doing okay? Well, go and have a look. They're chucking out roots like they're going out of fashion. They're spiking all over the place. And a lot of them are growing new leaves at the same time as spikes. And multiple spikes. Don't get much better than that, quite honestly, with Phalaenopsis. I mean, I hear of people that, oh, my Phalaenopsis didn't bloom last year. You know, the difference is the light. Now, okay, we've got watering and feeding and everything like that, yes. But you should be doing that to suit your environment anyway. That's nothing new. But just consider light. It is so important, especially if you are in an area, you know, a part of the world that gets those dramatic seasonal changes like what I'm heading towards now. So at the first possible time, you know, shade netting is coming off this year. It's going to be bare glass, yeah? And plants that can take the highest light can go nearest the glass. And what will that be? Well, my nobly dendrobiums, my long cane dendrobiums, all the dendrobiums that need the winter rest, and quite honestly the only exception will be my latorias and my phalaenopsis type dendrobiums, because they just don't need that intense light. If they get it, I don't think it can do them a huge amount of harm, but they don't necessarily need it. And the main reason is they're continuous growers. They don't come from deciduous forests, so they don't get that seasonal change to the greater extent. And being continuous growers, that normally implies that they come from an area where they may get a wetter season and a drier season, but their light level doesn't change much and their day length doesn't change much. That's why they are able to continuously grow. Well, you get the things like the anosmums and, you know, quite a few of the other types of dendrobiums. They come from an area where, quite honestly, they go from the luxurious growing season where they can chuck out growth and new root systems and do really well, and then they come upon harder times. They lose their temperatures. They lose a lot of their rainfall, and their only way of surviving those harsh times is to rest, shut down for a bit, and that's how they survive. You know, there's plants in your garden do that if you think about it. You know, there's plants that die back in the autumn to nothing, just a bare bit of ground, and the next year up they come again. They rest, and they rest during the harsh times. So that's the first thing to think about, is your type of orchid. Does it come from a place where it's going to get these so-called harsher times, seasonal changes, or doesn't it? And if it doesn't, it'll be a continuous grower, like the phalaenopsis, like the oncidiums, like the cattleyas, like my tolumnias, like the vandas. They come from a place where they grow all the time. And then we take them away from that wonderful environment with their lovely outside light and stick them in a house. They're not going to grow as well. Now, if they grow well for you, they're doing as good as they can. And that's all we can hope for. We do the best we can with what we've got. But it won't be as good. Those light levels will never be as good as being outside. Now, obviously in the UK, if I put a lot of my plants outside, they would get eaten to death by slugs and snails. And they're a serious problem in the UK because we still get a fair bit of rain in the summer. Yeah, we don't get the extreme heat and everything like that. Those particular creatures do incredibly well. And boy, do they love things like new growths. And boy, do they love new roots. Yeah. And there's other bugs and stuff outside as well. So I'm safer in here than I would be outside. And quite honestly, we get periods in our summer where we get dull weather, it's not that warm, and it rains, and it rains, and it rains. That's too much water, quite honestly, for a lot of the plants. So the thought of putting my plants outside is just a no-no. I can't contemplate it, not even for a short period. People will say, oh, you could build a shelter, and yet no, it's work. I don't want work. I don't want extra work. I don't want to have to go outside and deal with plants. I deal with them here. They're part of the house, so my workload is as low as it can get because my plants are right next to me. Also means I can keep my eye on them and keep some of the nasties out. Can't keep them all out, you know, but do your best you can. Anyway, light. It is a lot more important. Quite honestly, for me, what you feed your orchids with, as long as they get some now and again, doesn't matter that much. You know, those that need to dry out can dry out. Those that need to be constantly moist, that's your bit. That's not difficult. But trying to get enough light for plants that are not outside is difficult. And quite honestly, I'm going to shut this video off because this was just, you know, what it's like out here early in the day, and the fact that there just isn't enough light to keep these plants going. And you know, even when the sun comes out, it's still only going to get this place right for about 4 or 5 hours. Not 12 or 13, just 4 or 5 at this time of year. That's all they're going to get, and that's as good as it's going to get. It's not going to get any better. That's the weather and the, you know, the environment I live in, so I have to do the best I can. But I've got a couple more videos in mind. I'm going to go over all my experiments, you know. Well, I've done that then. I haven't got any. Or everything's an experiment. Depends on your viewpoint. Yeah? There are no experiments going on out here. Literally. You know, I grow the way I grow. It's not an experiment. I've been doing it for quite a while. I do change things now and again. You know, the idea of the holy clay pots came up. Thought we'll give that a go. That's worked. But then I knew it was going to work. So it's not an experiment, is it? Really. You know, that in the way that I can grow here, the holy clay pots for the Cattleya types is as near a perfect environment as I can get. So I knew it was going to work. And if you know it's going to work, is it an experiment, really? So either everything is classed as an experiment, trying to keep them alive, or none of it is. So I don't play around that much. So that's that video done. That's all my experiments covered. Mainly because I don't play around too much. I've got 3 or 4 ways. I've got the mounted orchids. In amongst those, there are those that are virtually bare-rooted and those that have got a reasonable amount of moss. So that's the 2 types of bare-rooted plants. All the others are in pots. And then there are 2 types of pots. There's the holy clay pots, and then there's the clear plastic pots. Yeah? And then there's what goes in those pots. You know, some of them are in large chunky bark, and that's it. That's all they're ever going to have. Some of them are grown in pure moss. Some are a mix of bark and moss. But that's it. Those are the variables. Mm. So, yeah, I'll leave this one. Chat about light. But if you want to play that game, if you've got a DSLR that actually shows your aperture and your speed setting, prove it to yourself. Yeah? Just get your camera in a position with its back to your main light source, pointing at your plants. And yourself, as it happens, to be able to do that, and see what your readings are. You know, see how wide the aperture has to open to get a, you know, reasonable picture, or how slowed the shutter speed has to shut down, you know, to actually get a decent picture. And then go outside. Sorry, frightened the life out of me. One of the big blue Vanda flowers just fell off and clonked everything on the way down out of the corner of my eye. But then take that camera outside to a shady part in your garden and point it at some plants and see what that setting reads. And even though you're in a shady part of your garden, there's a hell of a difference in the amount of light around outside to what there ever will be inside. So when you read in books that, you know, oh, Phalaenopsis don't like bright light, they need to be kept quite shaded, think about what that's saying. Yeah? Now, outside, that could be correct. But I bet in your house, they would work better with more light. So there's everybody tucking them round the corner so that they're out of the direct light of the window. If you actually look at how much light there is in a room 3 foot away from the window and slightly out of line of that window, and actually look at how much light there really is there, and it may not be enough for your plants to do as well as they could do. You know, and if that's all you've got, that's all you've got, that's what you've got to work with. But in the case of the Phalaenopsis, if they're not getting enough light, they won't bloom as often. They won't put up a new leaf as often because they're struggling. They might not look it, but they are. And then if you want to see how they can be grown, have a quick look at Rick. Because that's a hell of a set of Phalaenopsis, and that's as well as they can do as far as I'm concerned. I don't see them growing any better than that, and the difference is they get rained on, they got fresh air around them, and they get that light. And they're not even a highlight lover. So imagine the difference between something that really is a highlight lover, you know, like the Vandas, or a lot of the Vandas, not all of them, like most of the Cattleya types. You know, oh, if you want a stinker, what is it? Rhyncholalia glauca. Anybody got one of them that's bloomed lately? And that'll be the next video I'm going to do. Why won't you bloom? And the answers might not be obvious, but I'll leave this one for now. Light is critical, and not enough, and your plant will slow. It won't bloom as well as it could do. It won't grow as many roots. It won't photosynthesize as well as perhaps it ought to. And that's one of its main food sources. I know you chuck some feed up through the roots, but it still needs that process. And the higher the light, the faster that process, the more of those sugars that are produced. It's pretty important, you know. Well, have a think about that lot and then worry yourself to death. Am I worried? No. Because it doesn't achieve anything. I've got what I've got, I work with the light I've got, and I try and maximise it without singeing all my plants. Because remember, there is a difference. You get a bit of direct sun on some plants outside, you know, with some fresh air around them, and then do that through glass, and you'll quickly see the difference. It's called yellow patches with brown. It's called sunburn. They don't like it through glass. Some will put up with it if acclimatised gradually, but most of them are not going to like it through the glass. So there is a difference between outside and inside. It's major. And in some plants' cases, it could be paramount, and you may have some plants that you will just never get to bloom without that outside light, because that's how they work. They need it. And others will manage quite well indoors, or in, you know, behind this shade netting. And others will do okay, and others just might not do too well. Depends on the plant, depends on the, you know, type of orchid and its natural environment. And I know when you say with the hybrids they have no natural environment, well, it's still in their genes. You know, they started out probably right back up their history as two species. Well, those genetics are still down in the plant there somewhere, and hopefully a lot of their fussiness has been bred out of them over the donkey's years that it takes to get one of those really vigorous good hybrids. But try the best light you can do and see if you can see a difference, because I think you will. It's pretty flippin' important. And your camera can tell you. Your eyes can't, because your eyes just adjust. It's like now, my eyes, even through my slightly tinted glasses that I wear, looks quite bright. My camera says it's quite bright. This camera does, but my other one didn't. My other one said, this is no good. There is nowhere near enough light for me to be able to take a good picture. Walk outside the door, point it at some plants, and suddenly it's fine. And that is the difference. The outside light cannot really be achieved inside. I didn't mention artificial lighting because I don't use it. I don't know anything about it. I wouldn't know how to control it. And where the hell would I put the lights? Just think it through. Where would the lights go? I got stuff on racks in the roof. You know, I could put some strip lamps above that shelf. Well, that's going to get in the way of the Vandas. They'd be on top of the light, you know. And what about these down here? Do I have a light hanging under each shelf for all of them? Count them up. There's no way I can do artificial lighting. So the best I can do is get the maximum light in through that roof and through those sides. And today, when it dries off, because it rained last night, that shading's coming off of those panels, because the sun used to come round here late in the evening and shine through that window. So it would be shining on these leaves, That doesn't happen anymore. The sun is setting round here, so it never really gets to this glass. So just taking that off is going to make a difference. Every little helps. So there we go. A chat about light, or lack of it. And put a bit of thought into how, if you can make it better. Because I think it will be the one thing that, if you can make it better, will make the world of difference. As opposed to, oh, I'm going to try this fertilizer, or I'm going to try this additive. Yeah, it might make a bit of difference. You might struggle to see those differences. Yeah? But if you can whack that light up without burning your plants, I really do think you'll see a difference. You'll not only see the difference in the blooming, size of blooms, size of spikes, number of blooms per spike, but you might see a difference on the frequency as well. Like I say, I hear so many people saying, you know, my Phalaenopsis didn't bloom last winter. You know, I wonder why. You know, got some people growing outside and their Cattleyas bloom 2 or 3 times a year, and here in the UK, perhaps once, maybe miss a year now and again. I'll bet you anything you like, it's the light. That's what it'll be. So do your best with your light. Think about it. Where can I get as much light as possible without burning? And if you can get your light better, I can't guarantee it, but I'm pretty damn sure you will see better results. And it'll be the one change that, in theory, you might be able to do easier than you think, that'll make the biggest difference. Really, the biggest difference. You will see the results. You know, the better photosynthesis you get, yeah, what happens to your leaves? They green up better. You get more chlorophyll. It all balances itself out. You get better growth. You get, in theory, sturdier growth. Okay, like I say, you still need to chuck some feed in at the bottom and do your bit, but you're doing that anyway. Yeah? And do you really see a huge difference by changing fertilizers, or is it in your mind? Bearing in mind they don't need that much anyway, you know. So have a think about the one thing you can do that could make the difference between blooming and not blooming, the frequency of the blooming, and just the vigor and quality of your plants. See how many struggling plants suddenly stop struggling. You know, I've got down to a very low number of rescue plants in here this year, and that's literally because I only had 1 layer of shade netting there instead of 2, and I only had 2 on there for the midsummer period, and that went down to 1. So last year we had 2 layers there and 2 layers there, plus that on the roof, and most things didn't do bad. But I tell you what, they have done better this year. And I think by getting this, the idea is that once the light level drops right down, that shade netting on that end is going to get rolled down, so that effectively all of this top shelving has got no shade netting at all. And the whole of that end will come off. I can't, you know, the shade netting on the roof is probably coming off this weekend. That's easy. All I do is, it's on 2 big large pieces of wood stretched across and then wired. All I do is undo the wires and roll it across the roof. That's it, done. And then next year I just unroll it again and put the wires back on to stop the wind taking it over to next door's garden instead of keeping it here. So yeah, work on your light. I reckon you'll see more difference by dealing with that as best you can than any other thing you can change. Right, let's go and see if this internet uploads to YouTube at a reasonable speed. It's a slower internet, but I don't need that high speed. I really don't. You know, I can get on with something else and patiently wait. I don't need a high speed internet. Well, I haven't got one now, so... Right, see you again. That's a hell of a chatty one, but I think it's probably the most important thing that you can discuss. And when is a plant getting too much light? Well, you'll see some colour change on the leaves. You might see some purple bits, you might see some freckling on some types of plants. You might find that because the process speeds up in brighter light, that you would need to water a bit more often. Because basically the process for the transpiration, the brighter the light, the faster it works along with the photosynthesis, and stuff will move up through the plant and evaporate out through the leaves at a higher rate given higher temperatures and brighter light. So you might need to water a little more often, but just keep your eye on your plants and see what you can do with your light level. I think you might see a difference quicker than any other change you can make. See what you can do. As I say, I've got some playing around with my light level to do. And today I've got a shed load. Because the internet guy was here a lot of yesterday, I didn't get much done out here. The day before should have been pot watering day, so I'm now 2 days late. But then we've had hardly any sun over the last 5 or 6 days, so, you know, a few plants will be a little drier than I would like, but then I haven't got the temperatures. You know, literally over the last 7 days, the highest I've managed out here is 22 degrees C. That's not hot. Could do with more. And my nights are going down to like 16 now out here. You know, so everything's going to slow up. It's the way of the UK. See you again.